His pen was inches from the paper, one signature away from losing everything he'd built. But then a voice behind him, so quiet he almost missed it, whispered 4 words that froze his blood. "Don't sign. They're lying." The poor maid cleaning his boardroom had just risked her life to save a billionaire who didn't even know her name, and what she knew would either destroy them both or expose the 2 people he trusted most. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. Now, let's begin. Alan Wallace was 60 seconds from making history. The glass-walled boardroom of Wallace Enterprises glittered with power. Cameras flashing, executives smiling, champagne bottles sweating ice in crystal buckets. Across from him sat Evelyn Crane, elegant CEO of Crane Dynamics, her crimson lips curved in a smile that promised billions. Beside her, Richard Hale, Alan's childhood friend, his most trusted advisor, nodded encouragingly, eyes bright with anticipation. This merger was supposed to cement Alan's legacy. Billions at stake, headlines already written, history waiting to be made. The media called him the golden strategist, the man who never lost. But in exactly 60 seconds, he was about to sign away everything he'd ever built. And he had no idea. The door opened quietly. A young black woman in a faded cleaning uniform stepped inside, pushing a cart loaded with trash bags and supplies. "Excuse me, sir," she murmured, eyes lowered. "Just clearing the trash." No one paid her any attention. To them, she was furniture. Invisible. Alan lifted his pen, its weight familiar in his hand. This was the moment. His crowning achievement. But as the maid reached his side of the table, she hesitated. She bent slightly, pretending to retrieve something from the floor, her voice barely above a breath. "Don't sign. They're lying." Alan's hand froze mid-air. The pen slipped from his fingers, hitting the mahogany table with a soft click that echoed like thunder. A murmur rippled through the room. "Alan!" Richard's smile tightened. "Everything all right?" Evelyn tilted her head, feigning concern. "You look pale. Do you need water?" Alan blinked, the room spinning slightly. 4 words, 4 impossible words from a woman he'd never even looked at twice. His throat felt dry. "I need 5 minutes." "5 minutes?" Evelyn repeated, her voice smooth but edged with steel. "Alan, we're on a schedule." 5 minutes, Alan said firmly, standing abruptly. "I need to handle something." Richard's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Alan, this really isn't the time." "Then make time," Alan snapped, already moving toward the door. Before anyone could protest further, he was gone, heart pounding, mind racing, blood roaring in his ears. In the hallway, the maid was already pushing her cart away, moving quickly. "You!" Alan called sharply. "Stop!" She froze, then turned slowly, fear flickering across her face. "Come with me. Now!" He led her into a small break room and shut the door with a decisive click. The woman stood clutching her cart handle, trembling slightly but her eyes steady. "Talk," Alan demanded, crossing his arms. "And you'd better have a damn good reason for interrupting the biggest deal of my career." She swallowed hard. "I know how it sounds, Mr. Wallace. But I overheard things you didn't. They're setting you up." "Who's they?" "Crane Dynamics," she said, voice shaking but resolute. "Evelyn Crane and Richard Hale, your advisor. They're using the merger to drain your company's assets through a hidden subsidiary. If you sign that contract, you'll lose everything." Alan stared at her, disbelief warring with a creeping sense of dread. "What's your name?" "May Douglas." "How long have you worked here?" 6 months. Night shift cleaning crew." Alan stepped closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. If you're lying, if this is some game, some attempt at extortion, you'll be out of this building before sunrise, and I'll make sure you never work anywhere in this city again. May lifted her chin, meeting his gaze without flinching. I understand. But if I stay silent and you lose everything, I couldn't live with myself. For a moment, neither spoke. Her words carried no hesitation, no greed, only quiet conviction that cut through his skepticism like a blade. Do you have proof? Alan asked finally. I do. Photos, files, recordings. Give me until 7 tonight. I'll show you everything. Alan studied her face, the exhaustion in her eyes, the set of her jaw, the absolute certainty in her voice. 7 o'clock, he said. If you're wrong, it'll be your last day here. May nodded once. I won't be wrong. She left silently, leaving behind only the faint scent of cleaning solution, and a storm of doubt that refused to leave Alan's chest. When Alan returned, the room fell silent. Richard's smile looked thinner. Evelyn's gaze felt sharper, predatory. Everything fine? Richard asked carefully. Perfect, Alan said, taking his seat. He looked at the contract, then at their faces, faces he'd trusted for years. Actually, he said, closing the folder slowly, I think I'll review a few clauses again. Just due diligence. Alan, Evelyn's voice turned cold. This deal closes tonight. The board expects one night won't change anything, Alan replied evenly. If it's as solid as you say, it'll hold until morning. He stood, tucking the contract under his arm. Meeting adjourned. As he walked out, Evelyn's polished smile cracked like porcelain, and Richard's eyes narrowed to slits. Alan didn't look back. But one thought echoed in his mind, the maid's trembling voice. Don't sign. They're lying. That night, as city lights flickered through the glass walls of his office, Alan waited in silence. At exactly 7 o'clock, the door opened. May Douglas stepped inside with a small folder clutched in her hands. What she revealed next would shatter everything he thought he knew about loyalty, power, and love. And nothing would ever be the same again. The break room was empty, except for the hum of the coffee machine and the glow of the city skyline through the windows. May Douglas arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, clutching a small folder against her chest like a shield. Her cleaning uniform was wrinkled from a long shift, but her eyes were sharp, alert. Alan stood by the window, hands in his pockets, trying to appear calm. Inside, his mind raced. You came, he said. I gave you my word, May replied softly, stepping inside. She glanced at the door, then back at him. We need to be quick. The night security supervisor makes his rounds at 7:15. Alan gestured to the small table. Show me. May sat down and opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were printed photographs, screenshots, and a small USB drive. 3 nights ago, she began, I was cleaning Richard Hale's office. He'd left his computer unlocked. Probably thought no one would come in that late. She pulled out a photo of a computer screen showing an email chain. I took pictures of everything I could find. Alan leaned closer, his pulse quickening. The subject line read, Meridian Holdings, Final Asset Transfer Schedule. The sender, Richard Hale. The recipient, Evelyn Crane. Evelyn, once Wallace signs, we move immediately. The shell company is ready. 70% asset transfer will process within 72 hours under the portfolio optimization clause. By the time his legal team notices, the funds will be untouchable. He'll be left with debt and a dying company. You'll get your revenge, and I'll finally get what I've earned after years in his shadow. R. Alan's blood ran cold. There's more, May said, pulling out another document. A contract addendum with highlighted sections. This is buried in Section 47, subsection D of your merger agreement. It grants full discretionary authority over your liquid assets to Meridian Holdings, LLC, a Cayman Islands shell company. She pointed to the fine print. It's worded to sound like standard financial management, but it's a trapdoor. Once you sign, they control everything. Alan sank into the chair across from her, the weight of betrayal crushing his chest. "Richard," he whispered, "my best friend since high school." "I'm sorry," May said quietly. He looked up at her sharply. "How do you know so much about contract law, about offshore accounts and asset transfers?" May hesitated, then met his gaze. "Because 3 years ago, I wasn't a cleaner. I was a forensic accountant for Crane Dynamics." Alan's eyes widened. "I graduated top of my class," May continued, her voice steadier now. "I loved numbers, the way they told stories, exposed lies. Crane Dynamics hired me straight out of university. For 2 years, I built my career there." She paused, her fingers tracing the edge of the folder. "Then I found discrepancies in the quarterly financials, money disappearing into offshore accounts, falsified invoices, ghost subsidiaries funneling millions." Her jaw tightened. "I did what I was trained to do. I reported it, directly to Evelyn Crane." "And she buried it," Alan said grimly. "Worse. She thanked me, called me diligent, said she'd handle it personally." May's voice cracked slightly. 2 weeks later, I was fired for performance issues. Within a month, I was blacklisted. No firm would touch me. It was like I'd been erased." Alan leaned back, his mind reeling. "So you became a cleaner?" "I had no choice," May said. "My younger brother Jamal has a chronic illness. The medical bills never stop. Cleaning offices at night pays just enough to keep him alive." She looked down at her hands. "I thought I'd lost everything, but at least I could still take care of him." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars. "You risked everything to warn me," Alan said finally. "Why?" May looked up, her dark eyes fierce. "Because I know what it's like to be destroyed by people you trusted, and because staying silent would mean becoming just like them." Alan felt something shift inside him, a crack in the armor he'd built around his heart. Unlikely alliance. "Walk me through this," Alan said, pulling the documents closer. "What exactly happens if I sign?" May's professional instincts kicked in immediately. She pointed to specific clauses, explaining the legal mechanisms, the timing of transfers, the offshore routing designed to avoid detection. She spoke with precision and clarity, every word revealing the brilliant analyst she'd once been. Alan found himself watching her more than the documents. The quiet maid who cleaned his boardroom was a financial forensics expert, someone who understood the game better than most of his executives. "How did I miss this?" he muttered, shaking his head. "Because you trusted the people who wrote it," May said gently. "Trust is a weapon when it's used against you." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a shared understanding of betrayal, integrity, and the cost of standing alone. "You're brilliant," Alan said suddenly. "Why the hell are you cleaning offices?" May smiled sadly. "Because brilliance doesn't pay rent when you're blacklisted." Alan's hands curled into fists. "This is wrong. All of it." "But it's reality," May said. She glanced at the clock on the wall. "Mr. Wallace, you need to understand they're moving fast. Based on these emails, they plan to trap you within 48 hours. If you don't sign by Friday, they'll use leverage." "What kind of leverage?" "I don't know yet, but Evelyn doesn't take no for an answer." Alan stood, pacing the small room. "I need time to verify this, to build a counter-strategy." "How much time?" 48 hours, maybe less." May nodded, gathering her documents. Be careful who you trust. Richard isn't working alone. There are others inside Wallace Enterprises feeding him information. Can you stay off their radar until then? Alan asked. I'm invisible to them, May said with a bitter smile. I'm just the maid. As she stood to leave, Alan reached out and gently caught her wrist. You're not just anything, he said firmly. You're the woman who just saved my life. May's breath caught. For a fleeting moment, she saw something in his eyes. Respect, gratitude, maybe something more. Just don't sign that contract, she whispered. Then she pulled away and slipped out the door. Alan stood alone in the break room, staring at the evidence scattered across the table. Everything he'd built, everyone he'd trusted. All of it was a lie. Down the hallway, hidden in the shadows near the elevators, Evelyn Crane watched May Douglas hurry toward the service exit. Her perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her phone. She'd seen May enter the break room, seen her leave with empty hands and a determined stride, and she'd seen Alan Wallace standing at the window, looking like a man who'd just woken from a nightmare. Evelyn's jaw clenched, her elegant features twisting into something cold and calculating. She pressed a number on her phone. Richard, she said quietly, her voice sharp as glass. We have a problem. What kind of problem? Evelyn's eyes never left the service exit where May had disappeared. The maid, she said. She knows something, and she just spent 20 minutes alone with Alan. There was a pause on the other end, then Richard's voice came back, darker now. Then we deal with her. Tonight. Evelyn smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, we will, she said. But carefully. Very carefully. She ended the call and walked toward the elevators, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. In the shadows, the hunter had found her prey, and May Douglas had just become the target. Alan Wallace arrived at his office before dawn. The city still dark and quiet. He hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. May's documents were spread across his desk, each one a dagger aimed at the empire he'd built. He pulled up the original merger contract on his computer and began cross-referencing every clause, every subsection, every footnote. Section 47, subsection D. There it was, buried beneath pages of legal jargon so dense most people would skim right past it. All liquid assets exceeding $10 shall be transferred to Meridian Holdings, LLC for portfolio optimization purposes, with full discretionary authority granted to appointed fiduciaries. His hands clenched into fists. May was right. About everything. He pulled corporate records for Meridian Holdings, registered in the Cayman Islands 8 months ago. Directors, E. Crane and R. Hale. The evidence was damning. Undeniable. But what cut deeper than the betrayal was the realization that he'd been blind, too arrogant, too trusting, too convinced of his own invincibility. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in, Alan said, quickly minimizing the screen. Richard Hale entered with 2 coffees and his trademark easy smile. Burning the midnight oil? Or did you never leave? Couldn't sleep, Alan said, accepting the coffee. Big decisions ahead. Richard sat down, studying him carefully. You seem different, distracted. Is everything all right? Just being thorough, Alan replied evenly. This merger is the biggest move of my career. I want to be sure. We've been over this contract a dozen times, Alan. Richard's smile tightened slightly. What's changed? Nothing, Alan lied. Just doing my due diligence. Richard leaned forward, his voice dropping. Alan, I've known you since we were kids. I can tell when something's bothering you. He paused. Did someone say something to you? That maid who interrupted the signing? Did she... She apologized and left, Alan cut in smoothly. It was nothing. But Richard's eyes narrowed and Alan saw it. A flicker of suspicion, cold and calculating. "Good," Richard said slowly, standing. "Because we can't afford distractions right now. Evelyn's getting anxious. The board's watching. If we don't close by Friday—" "I'll have my answer by Friday," Alan said firmly. After Richard left, Alan exhaled slowly. His oldest friend, his most trusted advisor, a traitor. He picked up his phone and sent a quick text to May. "Stay out of sight today. They're watching." At 10 a.m., the executive floor erupted into chaos. Security guards stormed into the break room where May was quietly restocking supplies. Behind them came Evelyn Crane, immaculate in a navy suit, her face a mask of righteous anger. "That's her," Evelyn said, pointing at May. "The one who's been stealing from us." May's blood turned to ice. "What? I haven't—" "Search her bag," Evelyn commanded. Before May could protest, a security guard grabbed her cleaning cart and began pulling out supplies. Within seconds, he held up a USB drive. "Found it," the guard announced. "No," May said, her voice shaking. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before." "It has confidential Wallace Enterprises files on it," Evelyn interrupted coldly. "Financial records, merger documents, trade secrets." She turned to the growing crowd of executives gathering in the hallway. "This woman has been spying on us." "I didn't steal anything!" May's voice broke. "Someone planted that—" "Enough," said Patricia Reeves, the head of HR, stepping forward with a grim expression. "Miss Douglas, you're being terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out." "No, please!" May looked around desperately at the faces staring at her, some shocked, some disgusted, all judging. "I was trying to help." "By stealing corporate secrets?" Evelyn's voice was sharp as broken glass. "That's a crime, Miss Douglas. You should be grateful we're not pressing charges." May's eyes found Alan, standing at the back of the crowd. Their gazes locked. "Say something," her eyes pleaded. "Tell them the truth." But Alan stood frozen, his face unreadable, the weight of 100 eyes on him, his reputation, his company, everything on the line. He said nothing. May's expression crumbled. Betrayal, hurt, and crushing disappointment washed over her face. "Take her phone," Evelyn ordered, "and escort her out through the service entrance. I don't want her near any offices." A security guard confiscated May's phone while another gripped her arm. "Please," May whispered one last time, her voice barely audible. "I was telling the truth." But no one listened. As they led her away, May walked with her head high despite the tears streaming silently down her face. She didn't look back at Alan. She couldn't bear to. Within an hour, the story leaked. Corporate spy caught at Wallace Enterprises. Maid arrested for stealing trade secrets during Crane-Wallace merger. Security breach threatens billion-dollar deal. The headlines spread like wildfire. News vans gathered outside the building. Reporters shouted questions at anyone leaving the premises. In his office, Alan stood at the window, watching the chaos below. Richard entered without knocking. "Well, that was unfortunate," he said casually, "but necessary. Can't have corporate spies running around during sensitive negotiations." Alan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "The good news," Richard continued, "is that Evelyn's willing to overlook this security breach and move forward with the signing. In fact, she thinks we should accelerate the timeline, close the deal tomorrow instead of Friday." "Strike while the iron's hot." "Tomorrow," Alan repeated flatly. "Yes, before any more complications arise." Richard placed a hand on Alan's shoulder. "This is what we've worked for, Alan. Don't let one troubled employee derail everything." Alan turned slowly, studying his supposed friend's face. What if she was telling the truth? Richard's smile froze. What? What if she wasn't a spy? What if someone planted that evidence? Alan, Richard said carefully, his voice hardening. Are you seriously defending a maid over your own team? Over me? He stepped closer. I've been with you for 20 years. She's been here 6 months. Who were you going to trust? The question hung in the air like a blade. Get some rest, Richard said finally. Tomorrow's a big day, the biggest of your life. After he left, Alan sank into his chair, sir, his head in his hands. Outside the building, May Douglas walked through a crowd of reporters with security guards on either side of her. Miss Douglas, did you steal corporate secrets? Are you working for a competitor? How long have you been spying? She kept her head down, saying nothing, her heart breaking with every step. Everything she'd risked, everything she'd tried to do. And Alan had stood there, silent. When she finally reached the street, the guards released her. She stood alone on the sidewalk, clutching her uniform jacket, watching the building that had just destroyed her for the second time. A single text message appeared on the burner phone she kept hidden in her pocket, the one they hadn't found. I'm sorry. I'll make this right. A.W. May stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Words meant nothing now. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the city that had never been kind to her. That night, alone in his office, Alan stared at the merger contract sitting on his desk. Unsigned. The pen rested beside it, gleaming under the lamplight. All he had to do was sign. One signature. His legacy secured. Billions in profit. Headlines praising his brilliance. But May's voice echoed in his mind, soft and desperate. Don't sign. They're lying. He saw her face as the guards dragged her away, the betrayal in her eyes when he'd stayed silent. He thought of her brother, Jamal, of the medical bills, of May losing everything twice because she'd chosen integrity over survival. And he thought of himself, the golden strategist, about to become the richest fool in corporate history. Alan picked up his phone and dialed his private attorney. I need you to do something for me, he said quietly. And I need absolute secrecy. Of course, Mr. Wallace, what do you need? Alan looked at the contract one last time. I need you to find May Douglas, and I need to know everything about Meridian Holdings, LLC. Everything. He hung up and pushed the contract away. Tomorrow, Richard and Evelyn would expect him to sign. But Alan Wallace wasn't a fool. Not anymore. And somewhere in the city, a fired maid carried evidence that could burn his entire world down, or save it. The question was, could he find her before it was too late? Alan didn't sleep that night. By dawn, he'd contacted his private attorney, someone Richard didn't know about, and begun dissecting every page of the merger contract. May was right. Buried in Section 47, subsection D, hidden beneath layers of legal jargon, was the poison pill. Upon execution of this agreement, all liquid assets exceeding $10 shall be transferred to Meridian Holdings, LLC for portfolio optimization and risk management purposes, with full discretionary authority granted to appointed fiduciaries. It was genius, really. Worded to sound like standard financial management, but granting complete control to a company Alan had never heard of. He pulled corporate records. Meridian Holdings was registered in the Cayman Islands, founded 8 months ago by a lawyer who specialized in offshore asset protection. Directors listed E. Crane and R. Hale. Alan's stomach turned. At 9 a.m., Richard Hale walked into Alan's office without knocking, just like he'd done 1,000 times before. Morning, champ, Richard said with his usual easy smile. Ready to close this deal? Evelyn's getting anxious. Alan looked up slowly from his computer. I'm still reviewing. Richard's smile faltered. Alan, We've been over this contract a dozen times. What's there to review? Details, Alan said evenly. You taught me that, remember? The devil's in the details. True, Richard said, sitting down across from him. But sometimes you have to trust the people who've been with you from the beginning. Alan met his gaze. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. Something flickered in Richard's eyes. Suspicion, maybe fear. Did someone say something to you? Richard asked carefully. Because Evelyn mentioned that Maid interrupted the signing yesterday. Did she... She apologized for the intrusion, Alan cut in smoothly. Nothing more. Richard studied him for a moment, then stood. All right. But Alan, we're on a tight deadline here. Crane's board won't wait forever. If we don't close by Friday, the deal dies. Then I'll have my answer by Friday, Alan said. After Richard left, Alan texted May. We need to talk. Tonight. Same place. That evening, May arrived at Alan's office looking shaken. They know, she said immediately. Or they suspect. What happened? I was called into HR this afternoon. They asked me why I was in the executive wing during the merger meeting. Someone reported seeing me loitering near the boardroom. Alan's jaw clenched. What did you say? That I was doing my job and cleaning. They seemed to accept it, but... She wrapped her arms around herself. Richard Hale walked past while I was leaving. He looked at me like he was trying to remember where he'd seen me before. He'll connect you to Crane Dynamics eventually, Alan said grimly. We need to move faster. There's more, May added. I went back through the recordings I made. There's one conversation where Evelyn mentions cleaning up loose ends after the merger goes through. They're planning something, Mr. Wallace. Something bad. Alan's hands curled into fists. I need more evidence. Enough to bury them publicly. Can you get back into Richard's office? May Alan Wallace hadn't slept in 36 hours. His penthouse felt suffocating. All glass and steel and emptiness. The city sprawled below, a sea of lights that once made him feel invincible. Tonight they just reminded him how far he had to fall. He stood at the window, still wearing yesterday's wrinkled shirt, tie long discarded. The scotch in his hand had gone warm, untouched. May's face haunted him. The way she'd looked at him in that hallway, desperate, pleading, betrayed. Her trembling voice. I was telling the truth. And he'd said nothing. He'd stood there like a coward while they destroyed her. Alan set down the glass and walked to his home office. If he couldn't sleep, he'd find the truth May had risked everything to show him. He pulled up the merger contract on his laptop. This time he didn't skim. He read every word, every clause, every footnote. 2 hours later, Alan's eyes burned and his coffee had gone cold. But he'd found it. Section 47, subsection D, exactly where May said it would be. But it was footnote 18C that made his blood freeze. Coordinating offshore accounts through Meridian Asset Trust for optimal tax positioning and international liquidity management. Meridian. Alan's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling corporate registries, tracing shell companies through layers of legal maze. And there it was. Meridian Holdings, LLC. Registered, Cayman Islands. Established, 8 months ago. Directors, Evelyn Crane, Richard Hale. Alan stared at the screen, his heart pounding in his ears. She was right, he whispered. God help me. She was right. Alan accessed Wallace Enterprises' internal server network. Years ago, Richard had given him administrative access to shared drives, a gesture of trust between brothers who'd built an empire together. That trust was about to become a weapon. Alan navigated through folders, searching for anything connected to Crane Dynamics, Meridian Holdings, offshore transactions. What he found made him physically ill. Transaction records, wire transfers, account statements. Over the past 6 months, money had been quietly siphoned from Wallace Enterprises. Small amounts at first, $500,000 here, $800,000 there, then larger, $2.3 million, $5.7 million, $8.1 million, all routed through a subsidiary called Venture Capital Partners, which invested in nothing. It just funneled money directly to Meridian Holdings, nearly $50 million. Gone. Alan's hands trembled on the keyboard, but the emails were worse. He opened Richard's personal correspondence, filtering for messages with Evelyn Crane. The first was dated over a year ago, long before the merger was announced. Subject: Timeline confirmation. From Richard Hale. To Evelyn Crane. Date: March 15th, 2024. The naive fool still trusts me completely. 20 years of friendship and he doesn't suspect a thing. Once he signs, Wallace Enterprises is ours. You'll get your revenge for what his acquisition did to your father's company, and I'll finally step out of Alan's shadow. He's always been the golden boy while I played sidekick. Time he learns what it feels like to lose everything. Alan's vision blurred. His chest tightened. 20 years. 20 years of brotherhood. All a lie. He clicked the next email, hands shaking. Subject: Contract finalization. From Evelyn Crane. To Richard Hale. Date: April 3rd, 2024. Perfect. My legal team embedded the transfer clauses so deep even his lawyers won't catch them until it's too late. By the time Wallace realizes what's happened, we'll be untouchable. Watching him fall will be delicious. My father's company may be gone, but at least I'll destroy his destroyer. Alan stood abruptly, his chair crashing backward. Evelyn. The woman he'd once loved. The woman he'd trusted with his heart. She'd been planning his destruction all along. Not for business, for revenge. One more email, dated 3 days ago. Subject: Complication. From Richard Hale. To Evelyn Crane. Date: October 12th, 2025. Small complication. A cleaning woman overheard something. Handling it now. She's nobody. No connections, no credibility. If she becomes a problem, we'll destroy her like you destroyed that accountant 3 years ago. No one believes a maid over us. Alan's knees buckled. He sank to the floor, back against the desk, staring at nothing. May. They'd planned to destroy her from the start. Not because she was dangerous, because she was nothing to them. And he'd let them do it. Shame crashed over him in waves. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the empty room. "May, I'm so sorry." Alan pulled himself up, jaw set with steel resolve. He grabbed his phone and dialed his private attorney. "Mr. Wallace, it's 4 a.m. "Find May Douglas," Alan said, his voice hard. "Last known address, phone records, everything. I need it by sunrise." "Sir," and draft a letter. "I'm postponing the Crane-Wallace merger indefinitely pending internal audit." Silence. "Mr. Wallace, that will trigger penalty clauses. I don't care. Send it to Richard Hale and Evelyn Crane first thing this morning." He hung up and stared at his reflection in the dark window. The golden strategist looked broken, hollow, but broken men could still fight. And Alan Wallace had found something worth fighting for, not his fortune, not his empire, but the woman who'd shown him what integrity looked like when it cost everything. He would find May Douglas. He would make this right. And he would destroy everyone who'd tried to take them both down. At 7:15 a.m., Richard Hale and Evelyn Crane stormed into Alan's office. "What the hell is this?" Richard slammed a letter onto Alan's desk. "Postponing indefinitely? Are you insane?" Alan sat calmly. "I'm protecting my interests." "Your interests?" Evelyn's voice was ice. "We have a binding agreement." And I have the right to due diligence, Alan said evenly. Until the numbers add up, nothing gets signed. This is about that maid, Richard said, eyes narrowing. You believe a corporate spy over me? Alan met his gaze, the man who'd been his brother, the man who'd called him a naive fool. I believe in facts, and the facts don't add up. The market window closes Friday, Evelyn hissed. If we don't announce, then we don't announce. Richard leaned across the desk. Alan, think carefully. You're throwing away billions. For what? A maid who stole documents? For the truth, Alan said quietly. Silence. Evelyn's eyes turned predatory. You're making a mistake you'll regret. We'll see. They left in fury. Alan exhaled slowly. He'd just declared war. In her car outside, Evelyn made a call. Marcus, I need surveillance on May Douglas, former employee, where she goes, who she talks to, everything. What level of intervention? Evelyn smiled coldly. Whatever it takes to keep her quiet. And Marcus? If she contacts Alan Wallace? Understood. She hung up, staring at the building above. You want to be a hero, Alan? She murmured. Let's see how heroic you feel when everything you care about is on the line. The trap was closing, and this time, no one would escape. May Douglas climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment, every step heavier than the last. The South Side neighborhood smelled like rain and exhaust fumes. Graffiti marked the walls. A flickering streetlight cast shadows across cracked pavement. This wasn't the glittering city she cleaned every night. This was the part tourists never saw. She unlocked the door quietly, hoping Jamal would be asleep. He wasn't. May? Her younger brother sat on the worn couch, wrapped in blankets despite the warm evening. At 17, he looked younger, thin, pale, exhausted. You're home early. May forced a smile. Slow night. How are you feeling? Fine, Jamal lied, the way he always did. But May saw the pill bottles on the table. The appointment reminder stuck to the fridge. Pre-op consultation. Friday 9 a.m. The surgery he needed cost $180,000. Money they didn't have. I'm making dinner, May said, dropping her bag. Chicken pasta? You don't have to. I want to. She kissed his forehead. Rest. In the tiny kitchen, May leaned against the counter and finally let herself break. Fired. Humiliated. Blacklisted again. And Jamal's surgery was in 3 weeks. A knock at the door made May freeze. It was nearly 9 p.m. No one visited this neighborhood after dark unless they had to. Who is it? She called. May, it's Alan Wallace. Her heart stopped. She opened the door a crack. And there he stood. Alan Wallace, billionaire CEO in a neighborhood where his watch cost more than her rent. He looked exhausted. Haunted. What are you doing here? May whispered harshly. I needed to see you. To apologize. You can't be here. Please. 5 minutes. Jamal appeared behind her. May? Who's that? May closed her eyes. Go back to the couch, Jamal. But now. Reluctantly, Jamal retreated. May stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her. You shouldn't have come. I know. Alan's voice cracked. But I couldn't live with what I did. What I didn't do. You were right, Alan said. About everything. The offshore accounts, the shell company, the fraud. I found the emails, May. I know what they plan to do. May crossed her arms, her jaw tight. Congratulations. You believe the maid now. I'm sorry. His voice broke. I'm so sorry. I stood there while they destroyed you, and I said nothing. I was a coward. Yes, you were. The words hit like a slap. I don't expect forgiveness, Alan continued. But I'm going to fix this. I'm going to expose them. Clear your name. It's too late for that. It's not. I lost my job again, Mr. Wallace. May's voice shook. Do you know what that means for someone like me? I'm done. Finished. No one will hire me now. Alan stepped closer. Then let me help. Your brother, Jamal, I heard he needs surgery. Let me pay for it. May's eyes flashed with fury. Absolutely not. May, please. I don't want your pity. Her voice echoed in the narrow hallway. I don't want your guilt money. I risked everything to save you because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted payment. This isn't payment, Alan said desperately. This is charity? May's laugh was bitter. From the man who watched them destroy me and said nothing? Alan flinched. You don't understand, May continued, tears threatening. People like you never do. You throw money at problems and think it fixes everything. But my dignity isn't for sale. I'm not trying to buy your dignity, Alan said quietly. I'm trying to help save your brother's life. May's breath hitched. I know you don't trust me, Alan continued. I don't blame you. But Jamal shouldn't suffer because I failed you. For a long moment they stood in the flickering hallway light, a billionaire and a maid, two people from worlds that never touched. Why do you even care? May whispered. Because you're the only person who's been honest with me in years, Alan said. You risked everything for a stranger. And I... His voice broke. I repaid you with silence. May wiped her eyes. What do you want from me? Nothing. I want to give you everything you've lost. Your job, your reputation, your future. You can't promise that. Then let me try. Alan's eyes burned with determination. I'm going to destroy them, May. Evelyn and Richard. I'm going to expose every lie, every theft, every betrayal. And when I do, the world will know you were right. May searched his face, looking for deception. She found only pain and resolve. Jamal's surgery is in 3 weeks, she said finally. I'll figure it out myself. May, go home, Mr. Wallace. Fight your war, but leave me out of it. She turned toward her door. I won't let you lose him, Alan said to her back. I won't let you lose anything else. May paused, but didn't turn around. Then she stepped inside and closed the door. Alan stood alone in the hallway, heart pounding. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Johnson, it's Wallace. I need you to wire $200,000 to Mercy General Hospital. Patient name, Jamal Douglas. Make it anonymous, no traces. Sir, do it now. He hung up and stared at May's door. She'd refused his help, but he'd help her anyway, because some debts couldn't be paid with apologies, only with action. Alan walked down the stairs and into the night, jaw set with steel resolve. Evelyn and Richard had made their move. Now it was his turn. And this time, he wouldn't hesitate. Richard Hale stood in his office at 6 a.m., staring at his computer screen with cold fury. The wire transfer report glowed before him. $200,000. Mercy General Hospital. Patient, Jamal Douglas. Anonymous sender. But Richard knew exactly who'd sent it. He picked up his phone. Evelyn, we have a problem. 20 minutes later, Evelyn Crane swept into his office, her expression deadly calm. Show me. Richard turned the screen toward her. Alan transferred money for the maid's brother. He's not backing down. Evelyn's perfectly manicured nails tapped against the desk. Then we escalate. How? She smiled, sharp and dangerous. We make him choose between his conscience and everything he loves. By noon, Evelyn's private team had worked their magic. Photoshopped images, Alan and May in what looked like intimate conversations. Timestamps altered to suggest late-night meetings. Fabricated email exchanges with suggestive language. And bank records, doctored to show the $200,000 transfer coming directly from Alan's personal account, not anonymously. Richard studied the fabricated evidence spread across the conference table. This is good, damaging. It's perfect, Evelyn corrected. The story writes itself. Billionaire CEO bribes his maid mistress to sabotage a merger. Corporate espionage meets scandalous affair. The media will eat it alive, Richard said. His reputation, his company, everything. Destroyed. Along with hers, Evelyn added coldly. The poor cleaning woman sleeping her way to a payday. She'll be crucified. Richard hesitated. And if Alan still refuses to sign? Evelyn's eyes glinted. Then we take away the one thing he just gave her. Her brother's surgery funding. Mercy General is already struggling financially. One call from Crane Dynamics' board threatening to pull our charitable donations, and they'll freeze that account immediately. That's brutal. That's business. At 3 p.m., Richard and Evelyn entered Alan's office without knocking. Alan looked up from his desk, his expression hardening. I don't remember scheduling a meeting. This won't take long, Evelyn said, closing the door behind them. Richard placed a tablet on Alan's desk. We need to show you something. Alan glanced at the screen, and his blood turned to ice. Photos of him and May. Emails he'd never written. Bank records showing his name attached to the hospital transfer. What the hell is this? Alan's voice was deadly quiet. Insurance, Evelyn said smoothly. In case you continue being difficult. Alan stood slowly, his hands clenched into fists. You fabricated this. Can you prove that? Richard asked with a cold smile. Because to everyone else, it looks like you've been having an affair with your maid, that you paid her $200,000 to sabotage our merger. No one will believe. Everyone will believe it, Evelyn interrupted. A powerful CEO and a desperate woman. It's a tale as old as time. The media will devour it. Your board will demand your resignation. And Maid Douglas? She leaned forward. She'll be destroyed. Again. Alan's jaw clenched so hard it ached. Here's what's going to happen, Richard said. His voice conversational but cold. You're going to sign the merger agreement tomorrow. No delays, no investigations, no press conferences. And if I don't? Evelyn smiled. We release this evidence. Your reputation burns. May's life becomes a media circus. And... She paused for effect. We make one phone call to Mercy General's board. That $200,000 for Jamal's surgery? Frozen. The operation? Cancelled. Alan's face went pale. You wouldn't. Try us, Evelyn said softly. That boy has 3 weeks until his condition becomes critical. Are you willing to bet his life on your principles? Silence filled the office like poison. Alan stared at the fabricated evidence, his mind racing. Every strategic instinct screamed at him to fight, to expose them, to burn it all down. But May's face flashed through his mind. Jamal's frail body on that worn couch. One wrong move, and they'd destroy her. Kill her brother. You're monsters, Alan whispered. We're survivors, Richard corrected. And right now you have a choice. Sign the merger, and everyone walks away clean. Or refuse. He shrugged. And watch everything you care about burn. This is extortion. This is chess, Evelyn said. And you're in checkmate. She placed a fresh contract on his desk, the same poisoned document ready for his signature. You have until tomorrow at 5 p.m., she said. After that, we release everything. And Jamal Douglas will never see an operating room. They turned to leave. Wait, Alan said, his voice hollow. They paused at the door. I need time to think. You have 18 hours, Richard said. Choose wisely. The door closed behind them with a quiet click. Alan sank into his chair, staring at the fabricated evidence that would destroy an innocent woman. The golden strategist, the man who never lost, had just been cornered. And for the first time in his life, he had no idea how to win. At 4 p.m., Alan's phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Ms. Douglas confirmed for press conference tomorrow, 10 a.m. His stomach twisted. The plan had been simple. Hold a press conference, expose the fraud, clear May's name, destroy Evelyn and Richard publicly. But now, if he went through with it, they'd release the fabricated evidence. May would be branded a corporate spy and a mistress. Jamal would die waiting for surgery that would never come. Alan's hands trembled as he typed, "Cancel the press conference. Tell Miss Douglas something came up." He stared at the message for a long moment before hitting send. His phone rang immediately, May's number, the burner phone he'd managed to find. He let it ring, again and again. Finally, a text appeared. What happened? Why did you cancel? Alan closed his eyes, shame burning through him. He couldn't tell her the truth, couldn't explain that protecting her meant surrendering everything he'd promised to fight for. He typed, "Trust me. I'll explain later." But even as he sent it, he knew it was a lie. Outside May's apartment building, a black sedan sat in the shadows. Inside, Marcus, Evelyn's head of security, watched the entrance through tinted windows. His phone buzzed, a text from Evelyn. "Status?" He replied, "Target hasn't left the building, maintaining surveillance." "Good. If she tries to contact Wallace or the media, intervene. Quietly." Marcus glanced at his partner in the passenger seat, a former military contractor who didn't ask questions. "How quiet?" his partner asked. "Whatever it takes," Marcus said, eyes fixed on May's window. 3 floors up, May Douglas stared at her phone, confused and hurt. Alan had promised to fight for her, to expose the truth, to make everything right. Now he'd gone silent. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a terrible thought began to form. Maybe billionaires were all the same after all. Maybe trust was a luxury people like her couldn't afford. She set down her phone and walked to Jamal's room, where her brother slept peacefully, unaware that his life hung in the balance of a game being played by people who saw him as nothing more than leverage. May pressed her forehead against the doorframe. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I dragged us into this." But in the darkness outside, predators circled. And time was running out. May Douglas stood across the street from Wallace Enterprises, staring up at the glass tower that had destroyed her twice. The building loomed against the night sky, silent, imposing, impenetrable. She pulled her old janitor uniform from her bag and slipped it on over her clothes. Jamal was home sleeping, believing his surgery was somehow miraculously funded. The hospital had called that afternoon. An anonymous donation had covered everything. May knew exactly who'd sent it, and she knew why Alan had gone silent. He was protecting her, sacrificing himself to keep her and Jamal safe. But May Douglas had been a victim long enough. Tonight, she would fight back. The service entrance was locked, but May's old access code still worked. Security had never bothered updating the janitor clearances. The lock clicked. The door opened. May slipped inside, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The building was dark except for emergency lighting. Security cameras blinked red in corners, but May knew their blind spots. She'd cleaned these hallways for 6 months, invisible to everyone. Tonight, that invisibility was her weapon. She moved quickly through the service corridors, avoiding the main lobby where night security sat. Her destination was the executive floor, specifically Richard Hale's office. The elevator ride felt eternal. Each floor dinged like a countdown to disaster. 15th floor, 16th, 17th. When the doors opened, May pressed herself against the wall, listening. Silence. She crept down the hallway to Richard's corner office. The door was locked, but the cleaning staff had master keys, and May still had hers, hidden away after her firing. The lock clicked softly. She was inside. Richard's office smelled like expensive cologne and leather. His computer sat on the desk, screen dark, but not off. May pulled out a small USB drive, one of the items her forensic accounting days had taught her to keep handy. It contained data recovery software that could pull deleted files from any system. She pressed the power button. The computer hummed to life. Password required. May closed her eyes, thinking. Richard was arrogant, predictable. She typed, Wallace 2024 incorrect password. She tried again. Crane Dynamics incorrect password. Her hands trembled. One more wrong attempt might lock the system and trigger alerts. Then she remembered something. Richard's email signature always ended with his alma mater and graduation year. Stanford. 9. The computer unlocked. May exhaled shakily and plugged in the USB drive. The recovery software worked quickly, scanning Richard's hard drive for recently deleted files. Dozens appeared. Emails, documents, audio recordings from video conferences. May's eyes widened. Richard had recorded his meetings, probably for leverage, blackmail, insurance. She sorted by date, looking for anything recent involving Evelyn Crane. And there it was. EC Strategy Call 10.14 2025 MP3. May clicked play, volume low. Richard's voice crackled through the speakers. Alan's getting suspicious. The maid talked to him. Evelyn's response. Cold and clinical. Then we destroy the maid. Make an example of her. If Wallace resists, we threaten the brother's medical care. Simple leverage. And if he still refuses to sign? Then we release the fabricated affair evidence and ruin them both. Wallace loses his company, his reputation, everything. And the maid? She'll be lucky if she's not arrested for corporate espionage. Laughter. Sometimes I forget how ruthless you are, Evelyn. You don't get revenge by being kind, Richard. Wallace destroyed my father's company. Now I'll destroy his. May's hands shook as she copied the file to her phone. She kept searching. More files, more evidence. Emails detailing the shell company. Wire transfer authorizations. Contract drafts with the hidden clauses highlighted and labeled, Embed these, Wallace won't notice. Everything. She had everything. A sound in the hallway made May freeze. Footsteps. Heavy. Getting closer. Night security. May yanked the USB drive from the computer and shut it down, crawling under Richard's desk just as the office door opened. A flashlight beam swept across the room. Thought I saw a light, a security guard muttered into his radio. May held her breath, pressed against the desk's wooden panel, her heart threatening to explode. The flashlight beam passed inches from her feet. Probably just a reflection, the guard said finally. Moving on. The door closed. May waited 30 agonizing seconds before emerging. Her legs were shaking so badly she could barely stand. She had to get out. Now. May retraced her steps through the service corridors, moving faster now, less careful. Almost there. Almost. Hey! A voice behind her. Another security guard. May ran. Stop! Security! She burst through the service exit door, setting off alarms that screamed into the night. She ripped off the janitor uniform as she ran, leaving it in an alley dumpster. Behind her, guards poured out of the building, radios crackling. But May knew these streets. She'd walked them for years, invisible and forgotten. She disappeared into the shadows of the South Side, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. The evidence that would burn an empire. At 5:47 a.m., Alan's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered warily. "Hello?" "It's May." Her voice was breathless, urgent. "I need to see you, now." "May, where are you? Are you safe?" "Meet me at Riverside Park. East Bench. 30 minutes. Come alone." "May..." The line went dead. Alan arrived at the park as sunrise painted the sky orange and gold. May sat on the bench, looking exhausted but fierce. "You broke into the building," Alan said, sitting beside her. "I did what you were too afraid to do," May replied, handing him her phone. "Listen." Alan pressed play. Richard's voice. "Then we destroy the Maid." Evelyn's laugh. "Wallace destroyed my father's company. Now I'll destroy his." Alan's face went pale as he listened to the entire recording. The threats, the blackmail, the fabricated evidence, everything. "There's more," May said, showing him the files. Emails, transaction records, contracts with the fraud highlighted. Everything we need to bury them. Alan stared at the evidence, his hands trembling. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why risk this? They could have arrested you." "Because you went silent to protect me," May said, her voice breaking. "Because Jamal's surgery is paid for, and I know you did that. Because you were willing to sacrifice everything for us." She met his eyes. "So I fought back. For both of us." Alan's throat tightened. "May..." "It's time to end this," she said firmly. "No more fear. No more running. We take them down. Together." For the first time in days, Alan smiled, real and fierce. "Together," he agreed. Across the city, Evelyn Crane sat in her office, sipping coffee and reviewing the final merger documents. Her phone rang. Marcus. There was a break-in at Wallace Enterprises last night. Security couldn't identify the intruder, but they accessed Richard Hale's office. Evelyn's cup paused halfway to her lips. "Show me the security footage." Minutes later, she watched grainy footage of a figure in a janitor's uniform moving through the corridors. The figure's face was obscured, but Evelyn recognized the movements, the familiarity with the building's layout. "The Maid," she whispered. Her expression turned glacial. She made a call. "Richard, we have a problem. A big one." The war had just begun. And this time, someone wasn't walking away. The Wallace Enterprises Grand Conference Hall glittered with power and expectation. Cameras lined the back wall. Journalists occupied half the seats. Shareholders and board members filled the rest, their faces eager, anticipatory. This was supposed to be the corporate event of the year, the merger that would reshape the industry. At the front of the room, a podium stood beneath blazing lights. Behind it, a massive screen waited to display the historic signing. At precisely 10 a.m., the doors opened. Evelyn Crane entered first, elegant in a crimson suit, her smile sharp and victorious. Richard Hale followed, confident, adjusting his tie. They took their seats at the head table, barely concealing their triumph. The merger documents sat ready, golden pens positioned perfectly beside them. All that remained was Alan Wallace's signature. Alan entered through the side door, and the room fell silent. He looked different. Not the polished CEO they expected, but something harder. Determined. He walked to the podium without acknowledging Evelyn or Richard. "Good morning," Alan said, his voice carrying through the hall. "Thank you all for coming. I know you're expecting to witness a historic merger today." Evelyn's smile widened. Richard leaned back in his chair, relaxed. "But before we proceed," Alan continued, I'd like to introduce someone. He gestured to the side door. May Douglas stepped into the room. The reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Journalists leaned forward, cameras clicking. Board members exchanged confused glances. May wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, her expression steady despite the hundreds of eyes fixed on her. Evelyn's smile froze. Richard sat up straight, his face paling. "This is May Douglas," Alan said clearly. "Former forensic accountant, former employee of Crane Dynamics, and the woman who saved Wallace Enterprises from the biggest fraud in corporate history." The room erupted in murmurs. "What is this?" Evelyn demanded, standing. "Alan, this is highly inappropriate." "Sit down, Ms. Crane," Alan said coldly. "You're going to want to hear this." May stepped to the podium, her hands steady despite her racing heart. Alan nodded encouragement. She pressed a button, and the massive screen behind them flickered to life. 3 years ago, May began, her voice clear, I was fired from Crane Dynamics for exposing internal fraud. I was blacklisted, destroyed professionally. She looked directly at Evelyn. "By her." "This is slander," Evelyn hissed. "It's truth," May interrupted. "And I have proof." The screen displayed the first document, the merger contract with highlighted sections. Section 47, subsection D, May explained. Hidden within this merger agreement is a clause that would transfer 70% of Wallace Enterprises' liquid assets to a Cayman Islands shell company called Meridian Holdings. Murmurs grew louder. Meridian Holdings is owned by 2 people. May clicked to the next slide, corporate registration documents. Evelyn Crane and Richard Hale. The room exploded with noise. Journalists shouted questions. Board members looked horrified. "That's a lie," Richard shouted, standing. "These documents are fabricated." "Are they?" May clicked again. Wire transfer records filled the screen. $50 million siphoned from Wallace Enterprises over 6 months, routed through dummy subsidiaries directly to Meridian Holdings. "These transactions were authorized by Richard Hale," May said, using his CFO credentials. Richard's face turned scarlet. "You can't prove—" "I can." May's voice cut through the chaos. "Because you kept records, emails, documentation, all of it." The screen shifted to email chains between Richard and Evelyn, their words glowing for everyone to read. "The naive fool still trusts me completely. Once he signs, Wallace Enterprises is ours. We'll destroy the Maid if he resists." The hall went deadly silent. "But the most damning evidence," May said, her voice steady, "came from Richard Hale himself." She pressed play. Richard's voice filled the hall through the speaker system. "Then we destroy the Maid. Make an example of her." Evelyn's laugh echoed. "Wallace destroyed my father's company. Now I'll destroy his." The recording played on, every word a nail in their coffin. Threats, blackmail, conspiracy. When it ended, the silence was deafening. Then chaos erupted. Cameras flashed like lightning. Journalists shouted questions. Board members stood, outraged. This is fabricated," Evelyn shouted desperately. "Digital manipulation. The recordings were authenticated by 3 independent forensic analysts," Alan said, stepping forward. "The emails were verified by cybersecurity experts. The wire transfers are on record with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network." He looked at Richard, his former friend, his brother. "You were right about one thing, Richard. I was a naive fool. But not anymore." Richard bolted for the side exit. "Security, stop him," Alan commanded. But the doors opened before Richard reached them, and 2 police officers stepped through, followed by 4 more. "Richard Hale," the lead detective said, "you're under arrest for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." "No, wait, I can explain." Richard struggled as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Evelyn remained frozen at the head table, her composure cracking. "Evelyn Crane," another officer said, approaching her. "You're also under arrest." "You can't do this," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. "Do you know who I am? I have lawyers." "You'll need them," the officer replied. "You have the right to remain silent." As they read her rights, Evelyn's eyes found Alan. Pure hatred burned in her gaze. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Yes," Alan said quietly. "It is." The officers led them both out in handcuffs, cameras capturing every second. The room erupted in applause. May stood at the podium, tears streaming down her face as hundreds of people rose to their feet, clapping, cheering. For 3 years, she'd been invisible, discarded, destroyed. Now she stood vindicated before the world. Alan approached her, and the applause grew louder. He extended his hand, not in a handshake, but palm up. An offering. May looked at him, this billionaire who'd lost everything and found his soul in the process. She took his hand. Alan raised their joined hands high, and the applause became thunderous. "This woman," Alan said into the microphone, his voice thick with emotion, "saved more than my company. She saved my integrity, my honor, my life." He turned to May, the cameras forgotten, the crowd fading away. "She showed me what true courage looks like," he said softly, just to her. "What it means to do the right thing when it costs everything." May's tears fell freely now. "You saved yourself," she whispered back. "I just showed you the way." Before the cameras, before the journalists, before the board members and shareholders and the watching world, Alan Wallace took May Douglas's hand not as a CEO to an employee, not as a billionaire to a maid, but as a man to the woman who'd walked through fire to save his soul. And in that moment, standing together against the flashing cameras and thunderous applause, something shifted. The walls between their worlds crumbled, and for the first time, they stood as equals. Two people who'd lost everything and found something far more valuable: each other. The applause continued, but May and Alan heard only silence. The quiet peace of a battle won, a truth revealed, and a future waiting to be written. Together. The rooftop garden of Wallace Enterprises had always been Alan's sanctuary, a place of glass and greenery high above the noise of the city. Tonight, as sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, he stood waiting. May stepped through the glass doors, her breath catching at the view. The city sprawled endlessly below, lights beginning to flicker to life like stars. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It is now," Alan said softly. 3 weeks had passed since the conference hall showdown. 3 weeks since Evelyn and Richard were arrested, their conspiracy exposed to the world. The media had been relentless. Every news channel, every headline chronicling the fall of 2 corporate titans and the rise of an unlikely hero. Maid Douglas, the maid who'd saved an empire. But tonight, away from cameras and journalists, it was just the two of them. They walked to the edge of the rooftop, where a stone bench overlooked the skyline. "I've been thinking," Alan said, his voice quiet, "about everything that happened. Everything I almost lost." May sat beside him, waiting. "I spent 20 years building an empire," Alan continued. "Chasing deals, accumulating wealth, surrounding myself with people who told me what I wanted to hear." He turned to face her. "But I was blind. I mistook power for wisdom, success for integrity." "You're not that man anymore," May said gently. "No," Alan agreed, "because you showed me what real power looks like." His eyes held hers. "Standing up when you have nothing. Speaking truth when silence would be easier. Risking everything for what's right." May's throat tightened with emotion. You taught me that integrity isn't about what you have, Alan said. It's about what you're willing to lose for what you believe in. He reached for her hand. You lost everything twice, May. Your career, your reputation, your safety. And you still chose to do the right thing. I couldn't let them destroy you, May whispered. You didn't just save my company, Alan said, his voice breaking. You saved me from becoming exactly like them, from losing the one thing that matters more than any fortune, my soul. Tears slipped down May's cheeks. I don't know how to thank you, Alan said. You already have, May replied. You chose truth over profit, integrity over empire. You fought beside me when you could have walked away. I'll never walk away from you, Alan said firmly. Not ever again. Alan stood, his hands trembling slightly. Then he knelt before her. May's breath caught, her eyes widening. I'm not doing this as a billionaire, Alan said quietly. Not as a CEO or the golden strategist or any of those titles that don't mean anything without you. He pulled a small box from his pocket. I'm doing this as a man who found everything he was missing in the woman who whispered 4 words that changed his life. He opened the box. Inside was a simple diamond ring. Elegant, unpretentious, perfect. May Douglas, Alan said, his voice thick with emotion. You saved my fortune. But more than that, you saved me. His eyes shimmered with tears. You showed me what love looks like when it's built on truth, respect, and courage. You made me want to be better, not richer, not more powerful, just better. May's hands covered her mouth, tears streaming freely now. I'm not perfect, Alan continued. I'm learning every day what it means to deserve someone like you. But I promise to spend the rest of my life trying. He met her gaze. Will you marry me, May? Will you let me spend forever proving that you didn't just save my heart? You own it completely? For a moment, May couldn't speak through her tears. Then she dropped to her knees beside him, cupping his face in her hands. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Alan. 1,000 times yes. Alan slipped the ring onto her finger, and they held each other as the sun set over the city that had tried to destroy them both. But they'd survived. Together. 6 months later, the morning light streamed through the glass walls of Wallace Enterprises as May Douglas adjusted her blazer and smiled at her reflection. Head of Financial Ethics and Integrity. Her new nameplate read. She'd redesigned the entire department from the ground up, implementing forensic auditing protocols, whistleblower protections, and transparent reporting systems. Under her leadership, Wallace Enterprises had become an industry standard for corporate integrity. Her office door opened, and Jamal wheeled himself in, grinning broadly. "Ready for lunch?" her younger brother asked. May's heart swelled. The surgery had been a complete success. Jamal was thriving, enrolled in college, studying computer science, his future bright and limitless. "Almost," May said, grabbing her bag. "Let me just—" A knock interrupted her. Alan stepped inside, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit. "Mrs. Wallace," he said with a warm smile. "Stealing my head of ethics for lunch again, Jamal?" "Someone has to make sure she eats," Jamal laughed. Alan crossed to May and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I have a board meeting in 20 minutes, but I wanted to see you first." "Charmer," May teased, but her eyes shone with love. "Always," Alan murmured, then turned to Jamal. "Take care of her." "She takes care of everyone else," Jamal replied. "Someone has to return the favor." Later that afternoon, Alan and May walked hand in hand through the executive floor. Employees smiled and nodded respectfully, not because May had married the CEO, but because she'd earned their admiration through competence, fairness, and unwavering integrity. She was no longer invisible. She was a leader. "Do you ever miss it?" Alan asked quietly. "The quiet anonymity of cleaning offices at night?" May considered, then shook her head. "I miss the simplicity sometimes, but not the invisibility." She squeezed his hand. "I spent too long being overlooked. Now I have a voice, a platform. And I'm going to use it to make sure no one else gets erased the way I was." Alan stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression full of wonder. "What?" May asked, smiling. "I'm just realizing," Alan said softly, "that I'm the luckiest man alive." "Funny," May replied, rising on her toes to kiss him. "I was thinking the same thing about myself." They continued walking. Two people from impossibly different worlds who'd found each other in the midst of betrayal and fire. Behind them, the city hummed with life. Deals being made, fortunes won and lost, empires rising and falling. But none of it mattered as much as the simple truth they'd learned, that love, real love, isn't built on wealth or status. It's built on courage, trust, and two hearts brave enough to fight for what's right. Together. She once whispered 4 words that saved his fortune and forever claimed his heart. What did you think of Alan and May's story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. On a scale of 0 to 10, how would you rate this one? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.